Instead of the usual beach trip this summer, my mom and dad decided to take a road trip across America. At first, no kids were allowed to go, but being their favorite, I convinced them to take me along. Sadly, my two older siblings weren't invited. Sorry, Alex and Andrew, but you're with me in spirit. It was going to be a 16-hour ride before our first stop, and the fighting had already begun.
Here can go this way.
But why wouldn't you just come here and go poop like that?
It's not just that. It's a mess.
That don't even make
Yeah, it's not straight across.
Yeah, but that doesn't make sense.
That's how they made their road.
Okay, no, what I'm saying is,
Which is way down south. 74 travels northwest.
why don't these two look the same to me? They're not even the same.
Oh boy. Whoa. Okay, how far to Indianapolis?
After miles of bickering and the inability to read a map, we finally arrived in Mitchell, South Dakota at the world's only corn palace. Fun fact, the facade is made entirely out of corn, but since it wasn't open yet, we were on to our next stop. As Dad would say, gotta stay on schedule. Moving along in South Dakota, we stopped at the Badlands, a 244,000-acre landscape of eroding buttes, pinnacles, and spires among mixed prairie grass. And boy was it windy. Sticking to our schedule, we headed over to Mount Rushmore, a 60-foot granite carving of 4 presidents who represent the birth, growth, development, and preservation of our nation. And surprisingly, 60 feet seems rather small. Next, we ventured to Devil's Tower in Wyoming. FYI, it is an igneous rock formation that began to develop about 50 million years ago. Native Americans hold the tower as a sacred place where they make prayer offerings to their gods. As a sign of respect, climbing is not permitted in the month of June. Whoops, someone didn't get the memo. A fun fact about Devil's Tower is that it appears in the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and it appears in Alien Photobombed us. Rolling through the mountains, we make a quick stop while in Montana to see Little Bighorn Battlefield. Here in 1876, 263 soldiers died, including Lieutenant Custer, while fighting the Indians. His grave is marked with a black shield. Staying on schedule, we move onward to Pompeys Pillar. Here in 1806, Lewis and Clark, along with Sacagawea, stopped at this 200-foot rock, and Clark's carved signature can still be seen today. After another long day of driving, we finally make it to Washington State, where we met up with some relatives, and Sasquatch too. Heading now to Mount St. Helens, which erupted on May 18, 1980, causing a collapse of the northern side, creating the largest landslide ever recorded, which extended 50 miles. This A-frame house 25 miles away was buried up to its roof in ash, mud, and silt. After a day of rest, we headed to Mount Rainier, a beautiful snow-capped mountain that we were going to climb. Yeah, that's not us. This is us. Exhausted, but we made it. And after visiting with family for 4 days, it was time for the journey back home and to explore even more. The first stop on the way back was the Hangarman Fossil Beds in Idaho. FYI, there are no dinosaur fossils here, just a horse relative and not much else to see. Great Salt Lake, Utah, here we come! Pretty to see, but awful to smell. Then we realized they pumped their wastewater into the bay. Don't worry, it's treated. But we're still gonna buffalo our way out of here. And just like the settlers, we found Scott's Bluff in Nebraska. This Oregon Trail landmark is the second most referred to in the pioneer journals. This pipe, which was level with the rock when placed in 1933, shows how much erosion has occurred. So then, how hasn't this Oregon Trail eroded away? Anywho, time to head to the first homestead. This tiny building housed a family of 12. Mind blown. The Homestead Act of 1862 allowed settlers to head west, claim 160 acres and citizenship in exchange for farming the land for 5 years. Wish I had some free land. Final stop before heading straight home, the St. Louis Gateway Arch, or as my mom likes to call it, the Great Way Arch. This gateway to the west is 630 feet high and was constructed in 1963 on the west bank of the Mississippi. Finally, after 11 days, over 6,000 miles, and seeing some of the beauty that America has to offer, we safely made it back home to Ohio. Boy, am I exhausted. I think I need a vacation.